When you walk through this world long enough, you come to understand that the weight life places on your shoulders is not always something you were made to carry alone. There are burdens that bend the back, memories that tighten the chest, and moments so uncertain they turn a brave heart into trembling hands. And yet, in the middle of all that trembling, all that breaking, all that becoming, there comes a whisper, soft, steady, patient, a whisper that says, "Child, put everything in God's hands." Those words do not promise you an easy life. They promise you a guided one. They promise you a life where you do not walk alone, a life where every step, every breath, every scar and every sunrise is held within a strength greater than your own. There are times when you think that the world is leaning too hard on you. Times when you believe that because you are strong, you must never show weakness. Times when you convince yourself that if you let go, even for a moment, everything around you will collapse. But strength is not a stone face pretending not to crack. Strength is knowing when to release what was never yours to control in the first place. When you put everything in God's hands, you are not surrendering your dignity, nor abandoning your responsibilities. You are trusting that the one who shaped the mountains and balanced the seas can hold the pieces of your life without letting any of them fall through his fingers. Life has a way of testing you in the quiet hours. It waits until the room is dark, the street is still, and the world has fallen asleep. Then it nudges your mind awake. It reminds you of the bills that are waiting, the people who hurt you, the chances you didn't take, the words you should have said, the sorrows you thought you buried, but never quite let go of. And you lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if peace was meant for everyone except you. But peace is not found in the absence of problems. Peace is the presence of God in the middle of them. Peace is knowing that when you close your eyes, something holy is keeping watch. Peace is the quiet assurance that tomorrow will not come without help, and today will not end without purpose. Putting everything in God's hands means trusting Him with your anger, your confusion, your heartbreak, your dreams, your silence, your mistakes, your hopes, and even your doubts. Too many people believe they must come to God only when they are cleaned, polished, and perfect. But God does not ask for perfection. He asks for presence. He asks for honesty. He asks for the broken truth you hide behind your brave face. He asks for the tears you wipe away before anyone sees them. He asks for the weakness you have never spoken aloud. Because the truth is, God cannot heal the wounds you pretend you don't have. He cannot lift burdens you refuse to release. He cannot guide feet that insist on walking in the wrong direction. But the moment you open your hands, truly open them, something miraculous begins. The world teaches you to rely only on yourself. It tells you that independence is strength, that vulnerability is weakness, and that faith is foolishness. But there is nothing weak about trusting the Creator. There is nothing foolish about believing that the one who formed the stars knows where your life is heading. Independence may help you climb the hill, but faith is what moves the mountain. And there are some mountains in your life that will not move until you place them in hands far greater than yours. Every person alive carries a story carved across their heart. Some stories are written in joy, golden and gleaming. Others are written in grief, etched deep and dark. When you put everything in God's hands, you allow Him to rewrite the chapters you thought were ruined. You allow Him to bring light to the pages you believed were stained forever. You allow Him to take your sorrow and soften it into wisdom, take your pain and mold it into purpose. There are moments when life feels like a door that refuses to open. You knock, you push, you plead, you kick, and still the hinges do not move. And after a while, the silence becomes so heavy you think it must be personal. You begin to believe that rejection means abandonment, or unanswered prayers mean you are forgotten. But sometimes, God closes a door because what you are asking for is too small for the size of your destiny. Sometimes the no is protection. Sometimes the wait is preparation. Sometimes the silence is God rearranging things behind the scenes, making room for something larger, something fuller, something wiser than you could have planned. Putting everything in God's hands is not just for the battles you cannot win. It is also for the blessings you cannot manage alone. Because blessings, real blessings, come with responsibility. They come with growth. They come with expansion. They come with new challenges, new lessons, new perspectives. And without God's hands holding them steady, even blessings can feel overwhelming. When you trust God with your blessings, He teaches you how to carry them with grace instead of fear. You discover in time that nothing you give to God is ever lost. Nothing you surrender is ever wasted. Nothing you release is ever taken from you without reason. God multiplies what you place in His hands. He transforms what you offer. He breathes life into what you thought was dying. He restores what you thought was destroyed. Even when your faith is small, even when your hope is flickering, even when your heart is tired, God takes what little you have left and turns it into enough. More than enough. Putting everything in God's hands also means understanding that people are not always meant to stay. There are hands you held that slipped away, promises you believed that dissolved, friendships that crumbled, and relationships that left you gasping for air. It hurts. It leaves a sting that lingers long after the goodbye. But when you place your heart in God's hands, you realize that not every loss is a punishment. Some losses are mercy. Some departures protect you. Some endings save you. God removes people who cannot go where you are going. He detaches you from what is draining you. He frees you from what is deceiving you. And though it may break your heart in the moment, it strengthens your spirit in the long run. Sometimes you do not feel God working, but He is. You may not feel Him guiding, but He is. You may not feel His presence, but He is there, steady, patient, unchanging. Faith is not a feeling, it is a decision. You choose to trust even when the road curves, even when the clouds gather, even when the night stretches long. You choose to believe that God is doing something beyond what your eyes can see. And each time you choose trust over fear, surrender over control, faith over doubt, you grow in ways that cannot be undone. There will come a day when you look back at the things you placed in God's hands. The heartbreaks, the fears, the dreams, the unanswered questions, and you will see how perfectly they were handled. You will see how the things that terrified you became the soil for your strength. You will see how the situations you thought would break you became the very moments that built your faith. You will see how the detours shaped you, how the delays protected you, how the disappointments redirected you. And in that moment, you will understand that putting everything in God's hands was never about losing control. It was about gaining peace. When you walk with God, you walk with a quiet confidence. Not arrogance, not pride, but a calm assurance that whatever comes, you will not face it alone. You begin to move differently, speak differently, choose differently. You stop begging people to stay. You stop chasing things that are slipping away. You stop trying to fix what was never yours to fix. You stop exhausting yourself trying to make life behave the way you imagine it should. Instead, you stand a little straighter, breathe a little deeper, and trust that God's timing, God's wisdom, God's love will carry you where you are meant to go. Putting everything in God's hands means putting yourself there too. It means trusting that you are worthy of care, worthy of healing, worthy of purpose, worthy of joy. It means believing that your life is not an accident, your story is not over, your wounds are not permanent, and your journey is not forgotten. It means choosing hope when everything looks uncertain. It means choosing light when darkness tries to settle in. It means choosing faith when fear shouts loudest. And each time you choose God, you choose a life shaped by grace. Trusting God begins where your need for control ends. It is one of the hardest truths to accept because human beings are wired to hold tightly to what they believe they can manage. Control feels like safety, like structure, like certainty, yet it is often nothing more than an illusion wrapped in fear. You cling to plans, timelines, outcomes, people, and even pain because the moment you loosen your grip, you feel as if life might fall apart. But real trust is born the moment you stop forcing things to happen your way and start allowing God to move in ways you cannot see. You learn, slowly at first, that control is exhausting. It drains the spirit. It steals your peace. You become so focused on managing every detail that you forget life is not meant to be lived with clenched fists, but with open hands. Trust begins the moment you realize that you are not the master of every situation, not the architect of every path, not the protector of every outcome. That moment of surrender is where divine guidance begins to unfold quietly, steadily, patiently. There comes a time when life humbles you enough to make you realize that control is a burden you were never meant to carry alone. Perhaps you planned something for years, and it still crumbled. Perhaps you tried to hold on to someone who chose to leave anyway. Perhaps your efforts, no matter how sincere, could not fix what was breaking. These moments are not punishments. They are invitations, gentle, painful invitations to let God take over. You discover that the more you try to control everything, the more life slips through your fingers, like sand escaping your hand no matter how tightly you squeeze. Trusting God becomes a different way of living. Instead of forcing life to obey your expectations, you allow life to unfold under God's wisdom. Instead of holding fear in your chest, you breathe deeper because you know you are being guided. Instead of panicking over what you cannot change, you find strength in knowing that what is beyond your control is never beyond God's reach. The need for control often comes from past wounds. Maybe you were disappointed before, abandoned before, hurt before, and now you fear letting go because letting go feels vulnerable. You try to control everything as a shield, a protection mechanism against future pain. But control does not heal. It only traps you in vigilance. Trusting God, however, begins to soften the walls you built out of fear. It allows you to admit that you cannot predict every storm, but you can choose who anchors your boat. It allows you to step back from frantic worrying and step into quiet confidence. It allows you to say, even when your voice shakes, that you believe something greater is watching over your steps. God does not ask you to be fearless. He asks you to trust despite the fear. The moment you stop trying to fix everything alone, you begin to understand that God has been waiting for you to let Him carry what overwhelms you. Trusting God is not passive. It does not mean sitting still and doing nothing. It means doing your part and leaving the rest in hands stronger than yours. You plant the seeds, but you trust God for the rain. You walk the path, but you trust God for the destination. You make choices, but you trust God for the outcomes you cannot control. Trust is active surrender. It is working without worrying. It is releasing without resisting. It is hoping without demanding. You start to understand that what is meant for you cannot be blocked, and what is not meant for you cannot be forced. Trusting God creates a flow in life where you are no longer fighting every moment, but moving with purpose, clarity, and calmness. When you stop insisting on your own timeline, you open the door for God's timing, which is always wiser. When you stop forcing relationships, you allow the right ones to enter freely. When you stop controlling every detail, you make space for unexpected blessings to arrive. Trusting God rearranges your inner world. Worry slowly loses its grip. Fear becomes less loud. Doubt begins to fade. You start recognizing that setbacks are not signs of failure, but signs of redirection. You begin to notice that delays held hidden protection. You start seeing how closed doors prevented greater harm. You begin to appreciate that every unanswered prayer shaped a stronger version of you. All of this becomes clear the moment you loosen your grip and allow God to take hold. Trust begins at the end of control. It begins at the moment you look at your life and say, I don't know what will happen next, but I trust that I am being guided. It begins when you choose peace over panic, faith over force, surrender over stress. And slowly, you learn that you never truly needed control. You only needed trust. Surrender allows God to work in ways your strength never could. Human strength, no matter how determined or disciplined, has its limits. There are moments in life when you give everything you have, your time, your energy, your patience, your hope, and yet the situation refuses to shift. You push and push, believing that with enough effort you can force life into alignment. But sometimes the breakthrough you seek does not come from trying harder. It comes from letting go. Surrender is not weakness. It is the recognition that some battles are not meant to be fought by human hands. It is the understanding that divine intervention often waits on the other side of human exhaustion. When you surrender, you are not giving up, you are giving God room to move. You are making space for miracles, guidance, and outcomes that are beyond the reach of your own abilities. People often think that surrender means stepping aside and abandoning responsibility, but true surrender is not passive. It is an act of trust. It is a conscious decision to stop wrestling with what is out of your control and allow a wiser power to take the lead. You still show up, you still take steps, you still make choices, but you release the pressure of trying to control the outcome. Surrender softens your spirit, opens your heart, and breaks down the walls built by worry and fear. It teaches you to recognize that you are not carrying life alone. Many breakthroughs in life are delayed not because God is withholding anything, but because we are holding too tightly. We grip our plans so hard that our knuckles turn white. We cling to people who are not meant to stay. We cling to timelines that do not match our purpose. We cling to identities shaped by past wounds. When you release your grip even a little, you begin to feel the shift. You begin to see possibilities where you previously saw obstacles. There are storms that you will never calm through sheer effort. There are problems you will never solve through logic alone. There are seasons of life where the harder you try to control the chaos, the more it pushes back. Surrender invites a different kind of strength, the strength that comes from faith. When you surrender, you allow God to move the mountains you could only stare at. You allow Him to bring clarity to situations that felt tangled and confusing. You allow Him to open doors you could not have found on your own. You allow Him to place the right people in your life, remove the harmful ones, and guide you toward paths you would not have chosen but desperately needed. Surrender shifts the weight from your hands to God's hands, and that shift is often the turning point. There are moments when surrender becomes the only path to peace. You may find yourself drained from trying to make someone love you, trying to save a relationship, trying to force success, trying to fix someone else's pain, trying to change what refuses to change. These situations leave you empty, exhausted, and questioning your worth. But surrender teaches you that your value is not tied to outcomes. Your worth is not determined by what works or what fails. Surrender reminds you that your identity is not rooted in what you can control, but in who is guiding you. When you surrender, you stop carrying responsibilities that were never yours to bear. You stop trying to be the savior in situations that require divine intervention. You stop believing that everything depends on your strength alone. Surrender also opens the door to healing. Many people hold on to bitterness, regret, disappointment, or guilt because letting go feels too vulnerable. They are afraid that surrendering their hurt means minimizing it. But surrender is not denial. It is release. It is trusting that God can take your pain and transform it into purpose. It is trusting that the wounds you carry will not always hurt the same way. It is trusting that healing is possible even when you cannot see the path toward it. The moment you surrender your pain is the moment God begins to mend what you thought was permanently broken. Surrender also brings clarity. When you are tangled in fear, worry, and control, your vision becomes clouded. You make decisions based on anxiety instead of wisdom. You react instead of respond. But the moment you surrender, your mind becomes clearer. You begin to notice signs you overlooked. You become more sensitive to divine guidance. You start recognizing when to act, when to wait, and when to walk away. Surrender sharpens your intuition because it aligns your spirit with God's direction. Life has a rhythm, and surrender allows you to move with it instead of fighting against it. There will be seasons of planting and seasons of harvesting, seasons of waiting and seasons of receiving. When you surrender, you learn to trust the timing of your life. You stop rushing what needs time and stop holding on to what needs to leave. You begin to understand that divine delays are not denials but preparations. You begin to see that unanswered prayers often protect you from unseen harm. You learn that closed doors redirect you towards something better aligned with your destiny. None of this becomes possible until you loosen your grip and let God's hands take over. In the end, surrender becomes a way of living. It becomes a quiet strength that guides your decisions, softens your fears, and anchors your heart. It teaches you that your deepest breakthroughs do not come from force, but from faith. Faith grows strongest in the moments you let go. It is easy to believe when life is moving in harmony, when the pieces fit neatly, when the road is straight and the sky is clear. But faith is not built in comfort. It is built in uncertainty. It strengthens every time you loosen your grip on fear and trust that something greater is at work even when you cannot see the evidence. There is a kind of faith that whispers softly when everything is going well, and then there is a deeper faith, the kind that rises when life is trembling beneath your feet. That deeper faith is born not from having all the answers, but from releasing the need to understand every step. Letting go feels frightening because it asks you to walk forward without knowing where the ground will form. Yet that is the very space where faith becomes alive, where it breathes, grows, and becomes something unshakable. People try to strengthen their faith by holding on tightly, by controlling outcomes, by searching for guarantees before they take a step. But faith is not strengthened by certainty, it is strengthened by surrender. When life places you in situations where your plans fail, your expectations collapse, or your strength runs thin, you face a choice. You can cling to fear and exhaust yourself trying to force stability, or you can release your worry and allow faith to unfold. Faith does not demand perfection. It demands willingness. It asks you to trust that even in confusion, you are not walking alone. Every time you let go of the urge to fix everything yourself, you open the door for God to work in ways far greater than what your limited understanding could imagine. And in those moments, those raw, vulnerable moments, faith grows roots deeper than anything comfort could produce. There are times when you hold on to something because you believe you cannot survive without it. You hold on to people who are drifting away, to seasons that have ended, to memories that hurt, to expectations that no longer fit who you are becoming. This kind of gripping comes from fear, not faith. Letting go does not always mean losing. Sometimes it means making room. Faith grows when you release what weighs you down and trust that whatever is meant for you cannot be taken away. When you let go of what is draining your spirit, God places what is meant to lift you. When you release what has expired, God brings what will flourish. But none of this happens while your hands are clenched. Faith grows the moment you choose to loosen your grip. Letting go is also an act of humility. It is the acknowledgement that you do not have all the answers, that your perspective is limited, that your understanding cannot always grasp the complexity of your own journey. There is a quiet strength in saying, "I do not know, but I trust." It is in that humility that faith expands. You begin to see life differently. Instead of demanding immediate explanations, you learn to wait. Instead of panicking over unpredictability, you learn to observe. Instead of forcing solutions, you learn to listen for divine guidance. The moment you stop insisting on your own way, faith begins to shape your steps. You stop leaning on your own understanding and start leaning on the wisdom that has guided souls long before you took your first breath. There will be seasons when letting go feels like standing in the middle of nowhere with no map, no direction, and no visible sign of progress. Those seasons stretch you. They teach you patience, resilience, and courage. Faith grows in the silence after a prayer when the answer hasn't yet come. It grows in the space between what you hope for and what you see. It grows in the nights you cry out and feel no immediate change, yet still choose to believe that something is shifting beneath the surface. Every moment of waiting waters your faith. Every unanswered question strengthens it. Every setback becomes a lesson. There are certain transformations that can only happen when you stop fighting the process and allow God to unfold it. Letting go also teaches you trust in a deeper, more intimate way. When you release your fears and resist the urge to control, you begin to see things that were hidden before. You notice blessings you once overlooked. You recognize protection in the situations that didn't go your way. You understand that delays were not punishments but preparation. You begin to see how certain losses reshaped your character, how certain detours led you to better destinations. Faith sharpens your vision, not sight with the eyes, but sight with the heart. It allows you to see purpose in the unexpected and beauty in the uncomfortable. It teaches you that letting go does not diminish you, it grows you. The strongest faith is not found in the moments when everything is clear, but in the moments when everything is uncertain and you still keep moving. Faith grows every time you release control, every time you surrender your timeline, every time you choose trust over anxiety. It grows in silence, in surrender, in stillness, in waiting. It grows in the deep places of the heart where fear used to live. And once faith grows there, once it takes root through letting go, it becomes something the world cannot shake. God's timing protects you from what you are not ready for. There are moments in life when you feel certain you are prepared for the blessing you have been praying for. You believe you are ready to step into the next chapter, to receive the opportunity, to move forward into the place you have envisioned. But timing is a language of its own, a divine rhythm that does not bend to impatience or desire. What looks like a delay to you may be protection. What feels like silence may be preparation. What seems like a closed door may be a shield against something that would have broken you if it arrived too soon. There is grace in divine timing, even when it does not align with your expectations. When God holds something back, it is never out of neglect but out of wisdom. He sees what you cannot see, and He knows what you have not yet discovered about yourself. There are seasons when you feel the urge to rush, to push, to accelerate toward the life you imagine. You compare yourself to others, noticing how quickly their paths seem to unfold. You wonder why you are still waiting, still hoping, still standing in the same place while others move ahead, but comparison blinds you to the truth that each person's journey is crafted uniquely. Speed does not determine success, and delay does not signify failure. Some blessings need time to mature. Some opportunities require a version of you that has not yet been shaped by experience. Divine timing is not just about when the blessing arrives. It is about who you become by the time it reaches you. If you receive something before you are ready, it can overwhelm you instead of elevating you. If you step into a role before your character is prepared, the weight of it can crush you. Timing is not a punishment, it is protection. There are people you prayed would stay in your life, and yet they drifted away. At the time, it felt like loss. It felt like rejection. It felt like an open wound. But with time, you begin to understand that their absence was necessary for your growth. Some people are not meant to walk into the next chapter with you. They would have limited you, distracted you, drained you, or held you back from discovering who you were meant to become. God removes people not to hurt you, but to make space for the ones who will honor your purpose. If He had allowed certain relationships to continue, they might have led you into heartbreak far deeper than the temporary pain of separation. Divine timing filters what is harmful from what is helpful, even when you do not see the reason in the moment. There are dreams you felt ready to chase, only to watch them slip through your fingers. You questioned your worth, your abilities, your destiny. You wondered if the dream was even meant for you. But sometimes the dream is right, and the moment is wrong. Sometimes the calling is true, but the condition of your heart, your mind, or your spirit is not ready to carry it. Growth takes time. Strength takes time. Wisdom takes time. You may think you are ready because you desire something deeply, but desire is not preparation. Preparation is the quiet shaping of your character when no one is watching. It is the building of resilience through disappointments, the sharpening of vision through setbacks, the deepening of faith through waiting. Divine timing ensures that when the dream arrives, you step into it with stability instead of fear. There are situations you prayed would resolve quickly, yet they stretched longer than you imagined. You wanted instant clarity, but instead you received seasons of uncertainty. You wanted immediate answers, but instead you were given opportunities to develop patience. These seasons, though uncomfortable, prepare you for responsibilities you cannot see yet. Waiting teaches you endurance. Uncertainty teaches you trust. Delays teach you humility. If everything arrived instantly, you would never learn the strength that grows in stillness. You would never discover the depth of your own faith. You would never understand the beauty of transformation that happens slowly but meaningfully. Divine timing shapes you in ways instant gratification never could. There are blessings that require doors to close first. Sometimes God waits to give you something because He knows you are still holding on to something that needs to be released. A new chapter cannot begin while you cling to old attachments, outdated beliefs, or expired seasons. Timing works alongside alignment. God does not withhold what is meant for you. He simply waits until you are ready to receive without sabotaging it. He waits until your character matches your calling. He waits until your heart can carry the blessing without fear. He waits until the environment around you supports your growth rather than stifling it. Divine timing is not random, it is intentional. When you look back at your life, you often realize that the things you begged for would have been too heavy, too demanding, or too premature had they arrived when you wanted them. You see how the delays protected you from people who were not trustworthy, environments that were unstable, opportunities that were not aligned with your purpose. You begin to understand that God's timing was not denying you. It was positioning you. It was preparing you. It was strengthening you. It was molding you into someone capable of receiving, sustaining, and appreciating what is meant for you. What you place in God's hands returns with purpose and clarity. There are things you try to manage with your own strength, worries that keep you awake, burdens that weigh on your spirit, decisions that feel too heavy for one heart to hold. You carry them because you believe you must, because you have been conditioned to solve everything alone. Yet the moment you release them into God's hands, something shifts. It is not always immediate, not always dramatic, but it is real. The heavy becomes lighter, the confusing becomes clearer, and the impossible begins to unfold in ways your effort alone could never create. When you give something to God, you are not losing control. You are placing it in the only hands capable of shaping it with perfect wisdom. So much of life becomes tangled because you try to control the outcome before you understand the purpose. You rush decisions, cling to expectations, and hold on to situations that drain you. But when you give these things to God, the knots begin to loosen. You start to see that some paths were never meant to be forced. You start to understand that clarity is not something you can manufacture. It is something God reveals. When you place your fears, your hopes, your dreams, your relationships, your uncertainties into God's hands, you are choosing alignment over anxiety. You are choosing divine guidance over your own limited perspective. And every time you make that choice, life responds with purpose, direction, and a peace that comes from knowing you are not navigating alone. There are moments when you feel lost, unsure of which path to take. You overthink every possibility, analyze every detail, and still find yourself without answers. This confusion is not a failure, it is an invitation. It is a reminder to release the burden of finding the way on your own. When you give your decisions to God, you begin to see signs where before there was silence. You begin to sense direction where before there was doubt. Clarity begins to form not because everything around you changes, but because your heart becomes still enough to hear guidance that was always there. Placing something in God's hands does not instantly solve every problem, but it aligns you with the wisdom that knows the purpose behind every step. There are dreams you hold in your heart, dreams that feel too big, too distant, too fragile to speak aloud. You may fear disappointment, fear failure, fear that life will not unfold as you hope. But dreams placed in God's hands gain strength. They gain protection. They gain purpose. God does not waste the desires He has planted within you. When you surrender those dreams to Him, He refines them. He removes what is rooted in fear and strengthens what is rooted in purpose. He reshapes your path in ways that prepare you for the dream instead of letting the dream overwhelm you. What you place in His hands returns not only intact, but transformed, aligned with who you are becoming and who you were meant to be. There are wounds you carry that feel too deep to heal, pain that lingers, memories that echo, disappointment that sits heavy in your chest. You may try to suppress it, outrun it, or analyze it until it makes sense. But healing does not come from holding on tightly. Healing comes from release. When you place your pain in God's hands, you are not pretending the hurt never existed. You are allowing it to be transformed. God takes the parts of you that feel broken and reshapes them into wisdom. He takes your sorrow and molds it into compassion. He takes your losses and prepares them to become testimonies of resilience. Nothing placed in God's hands returns empty. It returns with meaning, with strength, with a renewed sense of who you are. There are relationships you try to fix with your own effort. Relationships that drain you, confuse you, or pull you away from your purpose. You hold on because letting go feels like failure. But when you place those relationships in God's hands, their true purpose becomes clear. Some will be restored. Some will be removed. Some will be realigned. God brings clarity to what your emotions have clouded. He reveals who is meant to walk with you and who is meant to be released. He shows you the difference between attachment and alignment, between companionship and purpose, between temporary comfort and long-term peace. What you place in His hands returns with truth. Life becomes quieter, calmer, and more meaningful when you trust God with what you cannot control. Your steps become guided instead of rushed. Your choices become wiser instead of pressured. Your heart becomes lighter instead of burdened. You begin to recognize the beauty in surrender, not as losing power but as gaining clarity. The things you once held with anxiety begin to unfold with grace. The situations that once confused you begin to reveal their purpose. The dreams that once felt impossible begin to move toward you in unexpected ways. What you place in God's hands will never return to you the same. It will return refined, strengthened, and aligned. It will return with direction where there was confusion, with peace where there was fear, with purpose where there was uncertainty. When you give something to God, you are not giving it up. You are allowing it to become what it was always meant to be. Peace comes when you stop carrying what God is willing to hold for you. There is a heaviness in life that cannot be measured by the burdens themselves, but by the way you try to bear them alone. Every worry, every fear, every disappointment, every loss, every expectation, these accumulate like stones on the shoulders of your soul, and you are asked to carry them as if you are solely responsible for the weight of the world. It feels noble, even brave, to hold on, to shoulder it all, to insist that you can endure without help. But bravery without surrender is exhaustion. Strength without release is strain. Wisdom without trust is blindness. The moment you allow God to take what is too heavy for your hands, peace begins to enter, not as a fleeting feeling, but as a deep, abiding certainty that you are not alone, that the load was never meant for you to carry alone, and that there is a power greater than your own hands willing to hold what overwhelms you. Many people resist letting go because letting go feels like failure. They believe that if they release the burden, they are weak, careless, or irresponsible. Yet the truth is that refusing to surrender does not protect you. It traps you. Carrying what God is willing to hold is like trying to lift a mountain with your fingertips. No matter how hard you strain, it is too much. You exhaust yourself physically, emotionally, and spiritually while missing the opportunity to grow in faith, clarity, and resilience. Peace is not found in control, no matter how disciplined or determined you are. Peace is found in trust. It is found in release. It is found in recognizing that some of life's weight is not yours to carry. Some of life's challenges are meant to be shared, and some of life's burdens are invitations to allow God to act. Life constantly reminds us of our limitations. You wake in the morning with a list of responsibilities that seem endless, a mind crowded with worries, and a heart weighted with anticipation, fear, or regret. There are decisions that demand wisdom, emotions that demand patience, relationships that demand care, and circumstances that demand strength beyond what you alone can provide. The human heart is resilient, but resilience has its limits. There comes a point when you must acknowledge that your capacity has boundaries, and that acknowledgement is not weakness, it is truth. It is the first step toward peace. It is the recognition that when you place your burdens in God's hands, the load becomes lighter not because it disappears, but because it is shared, held, and guided by a source infinitely wiser, stronger, and more loving than your own capacity. When you stop carrying what God is willing to hold, you begin to experience clarity. You begin to see the paths that were once clouded by stress, anxiety, and fear. The knots in your mind begin to loosen, and the chaos in your heart begins to quiet. Decisions that felt impossible suddenly have perspective. Problems that seemed overwhelming begin to reveal solutions. Relationships that were confusing become illuminated with understanding. The release is not passive. It does not mean ignoring your responsibilities or abandoning effort. Rather, it means doing what you can while entrusting the outcome, the unknown, and the uncontrollable to God. Peace is the natural result of that trust, because once the weight is shared, you no longer carry the burden alone. You walk lighter, breathe deeper, and approach life with a calm confidence that cannot be shaken by circumstances. There are wounds that we clutch tightly because we believe that holding them protects us from further pain. We replay the past, we nurture grudges, we rehearse our sorrows, believing that by remembering we prevent being hurt again. Yet carrying what God is willing to hold does not erase memory or diminish experience, it transforms them. Pain placed in his hands becomes perspective. Loss placed in his hands becomes preparation. Regret placed in his hands becomes wisdom. You do not stop feeling, but you stop being dominated by what once hurt you. The heaviness softens, the edges round, and the heart learns that it is possible to live fully without being weighed down by every old scar. Peace is not the absence of experience, but the mastery of it through surrender. The need to control outcomes, to predict what comes next, and to manage the lives and actions of others is a subtle form of carrying burdens that were never yours to bear. You try to protect yourself from disappointment by demanding certainty. But life's inherent uncertainty is a reminder of how much we rely on God's guidance. The moment you hand over control, the people, the circumstances, the timelines, the results, to God you step into freedom. You recognize that you are allowed to trust, to hope, and to let life unfold according to a wisdom greater than your own. Peace comes not from knowing everything will happen your way, but from knowing that whatever happens is held within hands that are perfectly capable of sustaining it. There are seasons when it seems easier to carry burdens alone. Pride whispers that you must do it yourself to prove your strength. Fear whispers that surrender will lead to loss. Habit whispers that letting go is dangerous because it is unknown. But peace emerges precisely when you reject these whispers and choose trust instead. Choosing to place what is overwhelming in God's hands is an act of courage. It is an act of humility. It is an act of faith that transforms your inner world. You begin to notice that the anxieties that once consumed you begin to fade. The fear that once ruled your thoughts begins to weaken. The restlessness that once haunted your nights begins to subside. You discover a quiet confidence that comes from knowing that what you cannot hold is being held, what you cannot fix is being guided, and what you cannot see is being watched over. When you relinquish control, your perspective changes. You begin to see that not every struggle is yours to solve, not every pain is yours to endure alone, and not every disappointment is yours to own. God holds the pieces that are beyond your grasp, and in his hands they are made whole. Peace is not about passivity, it is about alignment. It is about placing your life within a rhythm that honors wisdom beyond your own. It is about recognizing that some things are meant to unfold in time, not by force. It is about understanding that the burdens you release are the very burdens that will shape your growth, your resilience, and your joy. The most profound peace is found when you trust God with your fears, your failures, your hopes, your past, your present, and your future. It is a peace that rises from surrender, a calm that comes from release, a certainty that life is being held, guided, and refined. It is the quiet knowing that the weight is no longer yours alone, and that the hands carrying it are faithful, wise, and unendingly capable. Peace comes not from controlling life, but from letting God control it, and from the moment you allow him to hold what you cannot, your heart begins to breathe, your mind begins to rest, and your spirit begins to rise.